technology that they were working with was a device that propagated a hologram that was so dense that it had a lensing effect on events occurring non-locally in the quantum hologram. And these events were brought into the laboratory as essentially a light phenomenon, as a spectral array. These devices were called chronovisors, and they derived from an accidental discovery that was made by two Vatican scientists named Ernetti and Gemelli, working at the Catholic University of Milan in the 1940s, who partnered with the distinguished Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, and by the early 1950s had modeled a way to render holograms in which you could see past events going on. And so by the time I found myself in the project in the late 60s, these holograms that were being propagated by the chronovisors were actually cubical fields of light, so that if you were standing away from this cubical hologram, you could look in and see a form of sort of time travel cinema going on. You could see a past or future event occurring as a light array within this cube of light. If, however, you were on the stage of this device when the hologram was turned on and enveloped you, you experienced a form of virtual time travel where you were in that past event as a spectral presence. In other words, you could see and be seen by the creatures or human beings or creatures of that time, but we couldn't be harmed by what was going on in a sense of, let's say, being attacked by somebody in that time, because we were only there, for example, in the way that ghosts are present on our timeline or in our dimension.
So you weren't in a physical, tangible body, in other words?
Yes, we were in our bodies, and yet this past event was lensed into the laboratory, and so we experienced being in that past or future time as a form of a virtual reality, as a holographic emission that we were immersed in that allowed us to experience that non-local event in a virtual sense. And one of the reasons, the second reason that children were involved in Project Pegasus, as we were told during our training, or as I later learned in discussions I had with my late father, Raymond F. Basiago, who was one of the principal project engineers. He was a senior projects engineer for the Ralph M. Parsons Company, who was essentially the technical liaison between Parsons and the Central Intelligence Agency in the development of teleportation. But regarding the chronovision experiences, they needed small cooperative human beings because when they would place an adult chrononaut or time traveler in one of these holographic emissions, the holograms were very sensitive when they first started working with this device, and a large human being would cause the hologram basically to start quaking and go on the blink, just like an early television set. So they explained to us how they needed to train children to be able to put a human being in the hologram and interact with that time and place so that they could later report back what they experienced and what they saw, who they interacted with, and really this virtual time travel experience that they had in the chronovisor. The third reason was, in that context, children were regarded as being more keen percipients of what they were seeing in the holograms, whether they were looking at the hologram from afar or whether they were in the hologram relating with that reality in the past or future. They knew that children are tabula rasa. They don't know what they know, and therefore they see what they're looking at with greater accuracy. Also along those lines, they informed us that these experiences that we were having in time travel, both the conventional remote viewing, that is to say psychic time travel, the technically assisted psychic time travel in the Montauk chair to episodes in our own future, the virtual time travel in the chronovisors, as well as the most dangerous and far-reaching experiences that we had, which was actual physical time travel to past and future events via these Tesla energetic arrays or teleporters, and also a Stargate device that was assembled in our time in concert with staff members who were in the far future. They were essentially training us to be the chrononauts of the next generation. They explained how just as there was a space exploration program under NASA, there would be a fully fledged time-space exploration program under DARPA that would be, rather than being a public program, would remain secretive. And in the same way that there were individuals who were being trained to be space explorers, and that is to say astronauts, in projects Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, we would be the time-space explorers or chrononauts that would receive additional specialized training and have adult experiences as the nation's chrononauts. And so we were clearly being groomed for adult service in Project Pegasus, which was sort of a secret twin of Project Mercury. In fact, I was present at a discussion at a bar in Albuquerque when I was on the project between my late father and the defense attaché to the project, which was a man who was destined for a fairly illustrious career in government, and that was Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. He was the point man between the Pentagon and individuals like my father, who were the project engineers on Project Pegasus. And he was explaining to my father how when we were in high school, we would be recruited into the Naval Academy, and that would be used as the context to involve us in additional secret activities as the nation's chrononauts. And so that was their plan for our lives. We would be essentially adult time-space explorers in a secret Navy program that would continue to extend its ambit, essentially mapping the past and future and carrying out special missions where we retrieved information, for example, from the future, which was a limited set of activities that I was actually involved in myself while I was still a child on the project. And so they were using children for all of those reasons, and it was actually in the several years prior to my father's death in 1990, we had a number of heart-to-hearts about what I had experienced in the project and what we had experienced together. We had really a high adventure, as a father and son caught up in the early days of time-space exploration by the U.S. government, but we always had this one-off kind of secret relationship about what we had done together because, quite frankly, my mother and my siblings and the other kids in the neighborhood and so forth really didn't have a need to know about what the U.S. government was doing secretly in the area of quantum access. And so most of the discussions I had when I was on the project about the project were, one-off heart-to-heart discussions with my dad. And he gave me a fifth reason as to why they were working with children in such a dangerous and experimental and truly emergent area of high technology. And that is because when they were using adults, for example, Navy enlisted personnel, in time travel, the deracinating effects of being moved back and forth between timelines was frequently causing adult time travelers to basically become insane. And so they wanted to bring children along slowly and acclimate them to time-space exploration and its sort of disquieting psychological effects while we were still children. Just as if, for example, you trained a child to scuba dive, at a certain age, they're hopping between the terrestrial and the aquatic environments, like amphibious animals. They're so comfortable scuba diving. I think it was in that spirit that they decided that they would basically survey the U.S. population of children for children of high intelligence, high psychic ability, and who were perceptive, who had, type B sort of cooperative personalities that would comply with the secrecy and ask what we were asked to do in the program, and essentially bring us along as America's next generation, or really first generation of chrononauts. And so, that was the fifth reason. My dad explained basically we were being psychologically prepared for very substantial activities in time travel and adulthood because they thought that we would be more psychologically grounded when we were asked to do so as grown-ups.
What you described somewhat reminds me of things I've heard about the Manhattan Project, in which, if it's true, they used adults with not such great results. Is that something you see as being a similar, more advanced version of it? Or Pegasus being a more advanced version of the Manhattan?
Yes, I think there are really very significant historical linkages between the Manhattan Project and Project Pegasus. One of them being the fact that, Nikola Tesla's papers were never lost. They were forwarded to the very physicists who built the atomic bomb. There was also an overlap, just situationally, between a number of key project personnel and the Manhattan Project. Let me just cite one, and then I can describe several of my encounters on the project with some of the other very illustrious physicists who were attached to the Manhattan Project. The federal science administrator for Project Pegasus was Dr. Harold M. Agnew. My father and I, well, at least I first encountered Dr. Agnew